So, the video you're about to watch has a lot of great teaching in it, and has some really fun moments. And I just want to give you a little bit of a warning. Well, two warnings. One, I don't know what I did, but I goofed up the audio, and so it sounds like Karen and I are in a baseball stadium or something, and we've got the announcer voice going. Next up to bat, Jose Canseco. So anyways, if you can bear with that horrible effect, I tried to clean it up as best I could, but anyways, there's some really good stuff in there, and it's important prep for when you join us on Sunday for our in-person gathering. But I just wanted to give you a little heads up. It might be a little bit difficult to hear and understand, but please try to tough it out because there is some really great teaching in there. And then the other thing is that we do talk about some subjects that might be a little bit PG-13, so be aware of that. But anyways, sorry that the audio was goofy. Now I've got it fixed clearly, so our next video will be but for the time being, good luck. And but yeah, there's still good stuff in there, so enjoy. We get better at this every single time.
We do.
We nail the intro.
I didn't sniffle.
You didn't sniffle. I didn't snort or do anything weird. So, hey, we're back again. We survived last weekend. For those of you that maybe don't know or hadn't heard, we did a barbecue, community outreach barbecue last week.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel like it went?
It was really windy, but it was really fun. We were able to help a lot of people, and unfortunately, the weather was not wonderful.
People kept telling us a message. Are you guys going to cancel because there was a tornado warning? A tornado warning? Don't be crazy. There's not going to be a tornado in Michigan, but it was like a hurricane. The wind was blowing so hard, and I heard rumors that you were pole dancing.
I was holding down poles.
Every person, there was at one point we had set up everything before we were supposed to start, and the wind was blowing, and it was so chaotic, and the wind had ripped one of the tents. We have these big, 20-foot tents, and had ripped one of them in half, and then every person who could stand was holding on to something. I am not exaggerating.
It was insane.
We were holding on to, we had the other tent was tied to one of those big old picnic tables, and I was holding down the picnic table because the wind was trying to lift up the picnic table. But yeah, everybody was literally holding on to something. And Melissa was just out there cooking. She just flipping chickens like it was nobody's business. And so that's a good segue to say we want to thank everybody that worked super hard. And I will name you all by name because you all deserve it. You did a great job. We want to thank Bobby and Miss Judy and Barb. They provided a lot of the support in terms of helping us to get the food and stuff together. And at the event, they were very friendly faces that helped people put together their care packages and stuff. We want to thank Jane, who did a bang-up job on getting out there and getting donations. I should have added it up, but I think we had something like $250 or so worth of gift cards that were donated, and Jane went out and did that, and did a lot of gathering of things as well. Who else we got to thank?
Sherry.
We have to thank Sherry. Yeah, Sherry was serving food out there.
Even in the rain.
Even in the rain. Yep. Sherry was out serving food. Give a special shout out to Noah and Paul and
Eli and Micah.
And Melissa. Well, I had an order of what I was doing. Noah and Paul and Micah and Eli were very important in setting things up, carrying stuff around, moving things around. Especially Micah and Eli. They're little guys. Well, I mean, they're not little guys. They're not little anymore, but they were doing a job. Yeah, and they were moving For real? High school?
I think he's going into 9th grade.
You're old.
Oh my goodness, I am.
So anyways, they were moving stuff around, playing with the kids,
Yeah.
bringing kids over. Like they saw kids and had them come over. And Noah basically covered everything. If there was something to be done, he was there. Even to breaking up fights. Super shout out to Noah. And then, of course, Melissa, who...
Okay, nobody fought over food or anything.
No. They were little kids fighting over games.
It was a thing in the park. It's okay.
Melissa and we was thank Melissa for the very hard work of cooking and doing all the prep in the week. And then, of course, folks that weren't able to be there but did help out throughout the whole preparation. Don't want to forget Chris and Jen, who contributed and were supporting with prayer, and also Joy and Daniel, who were also contributing and supporting with prayer. And last but not least, we also want to thank our friends at Classy Cuts.
Yes.
I was really disappointed that they didn't get to cut hair because I wanted to see them in action, but there was no way.
There was no way they could cut hair in that way.
They would have just been doing all blowouts that day. Just everybody was getting blowouts on that day, if that's what it was. But they were shaved heads. But they were super generous, and they gave us a bunch of vouchers to give out to folks that needed haircuts. So people did come to get their haircuts. They were a little disappointed that they couldn't. They understood though with the weather and stuff. Nobody would give us any trouble, and so we were able to give them a voucher and say, "Hey, you check them out." Our friends Jesse and other Melissa at Classy Cuts. Am I forgetting anybody that was there that was helping out?
I don't think
A lot of community members that came out that were super cool. I didn't get everybody's names, but a lot of people that came to eat also came to help. There was one guy that during the worst weather part, he had like a broken leg, but he was there like helping us to hold stuff down. Right.
He said respectable women don't hang on to poles.
Right. So there were people from the community that came out and helped out. Everybody was great. Nobody. I think everybody had a great time, despite the really adverse weather and conditions and stuff. But if I forgot you, or if I forgot to mention you, I'm sorry. I'm only human, and I don't remember everything. I do my best, but remind me, and I will make sure that I thank you. But thank you to everybody who did such a wonderful job. It's just one of those things where. I named a whole bunch of names, but in reality, one of the things that kind of makes my heart glad and makes me kind of proud in a good way was to know that the bulk of the effort was put together by a very small group of people, right? And most of them were ladies, and most of them were retired ladies. And so, so girl and grandma power, right? So you're never out of the game, right? There's always an opportunity, and we were able to serve a lot of people and make a really big difference. Being a small group, we're not a big church. In fact, everybody in our church was there except for 4 people, and I named all of them, right? So we're not a big church, but we were able to help a good deal of people, and so that's a challenge to put out there that. You're never out of the fight, no matter what your personal condition is. You can contribute something in a major way, and just because you're little doesn't mean you can't do a big thing.
That's right.
And so those are some of my main takeaways. Do you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, we have we had buckets that we had filled with things. They like buckets,
lots of stuff,
and we have. One
bucket,
and we're going to donate that. Hopefully tomorrow I will be able to drop that off at the Women and Children's Shelter here locally. They were doing like construction or cleanup or something, so they haven't been accepting at this time.
We had 4 long tables that were covered in toiletries, like everything you can imagine. A person can diapers, wipes. The whole 9 yards, books, those were like super popular, games for the kids. And of all of that stuff, 4 of those long tables, we had 1 basket that was left over.
And less than a basket of books left over that were donated from a local school program. And those will also be taken to the shelter. So Yeah.
So a lot of people will benefit from that. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. So it was very good. If you weren't there, you missed a really neat thing, but don't despair. We'll do it again. Yes, we will do it again. We will do it. We just need to catch our breath a little bit and have a little more time to plan. And but all things considered, I think it went great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll be out there Sunday at the park.
We will
have a small barbecue and
not to the scale
talk
we have
about
that.
this that we're about to talk
That's
about
right.
and have church on Sunday evening at 6 o'clock at Mona Lake Park.
Yes. Hey, you're like a sales.
Hey.
Yeah. Karen, always be selling. Always be selling. So, yeah. So
we told a lot of people that that's where we'd be every Sunday. So even if it's just our small group that shows, we'll be out there Sunday. Hopefully it won't be that windy.
Yeah, I don't think it shouldn't. The weather should be great. And so don't get the wrong idea. We're not going to have it like to the level that we had last week. But we will still be grilling burgers and hot dogs and have food to share with whoever shows up. Anybody, everybody's welcome.
That's just something we do every Sunday. I mean, if you think about it, it's biblical.
It's very biblical.
In Acts, the people got together in people's homes and they shared food together.
Or, as we learned in Philippians, under a tree by the river.
There you go. So, food brings people together, and it's always more fun to talk while you're eating.
Right. So they broke bread together and dedicated themselves to the apostles' teaching. And so, with that said,
let's look at what the apostles
right into the apostles' teaching. If you need a reminder, and I need to remind myself so I don't say Philippians again, because I seem to keep wanting to go back to Philippians. We're in the book of Colossians. I call it a book, but it's really a letter. I'm not going to do my whole spiel because you can watch other videos and learn how the Bible works. But this is Paul's letter to the Colossians, and we are in chapter 3. We're going to read all of chapter 3 and one verse of chapter 4 because, like I've said it before, the numbers and stuff weren't put there originally. We put them there to help us to organize. And for some reason, the people that put the numbers in put verse 4:1 in chapter 4. Anyways, it's weird the way they broke it up this time. The thought goes together, so we're just going to take one extra verse there. So, all right, if you're ready, if you have your Bibles, if you have a real Bible, they're all real Bibles. If you have a paper Bible, you can open your Bible up to the book of Colossians. If you have an app, we always recommend the Bible app. You can use Bible Gateway, Blue Letter Bible, Logos Bible Software. There's a whole bunch of them out there. But you want to find Colossians chapter 3, and we will be reading from the NIV. So we'll just take a read through it, and we'll highlight a couple of things, and there's some really interesting stuff we're going to talk about. Karen's got the Bible. It's really too bright to see on the screen, but it's there. It's definitely there. On my Bible app, on my iPad, the whole chapter is highlighted in different colors because everything in there is just so important. But the stuff that's highlighted on the screen now is just stuff we want to talk about today. So let's take a look. Colossians chapter 3 says this: Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourself of such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its Creator. Here, there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as a member of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to the Father through him. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for their wrongs, and there is no favoritism. We'll jump here to chapter 4. Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. And that's where we'll stop right now. And then let me get down here. All right, there we go. So that's a whole lot to chew on. So,
Yes.
what say you, Karen? You usually have some good thoughts. So.
Well, thanks. Set your mind on things above and not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. So Paul starts out immediately talking about how Christ was raised, and you have accepted him, and he is seated with God on the right hand. So we know from history and from just the way that our judicial system works, the advocate for someone is usually at the right hand of the judge, right? Yeah. So Jesus sits at God's right hand as our advocate.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was drinking.
You were drinking.
I could not verbally acknowledge.
So
Not that I've been in court that often.
He used to speed a lot.
Depends on your perspective of where you're looking. Yes. Anyways, so yes, go ahead. So yes, Jesus is our advocate. Yeah, go
And so we're setting our minds on things above, not on earthly things. That doesn't mean that we don't live on earth, right? I mean, things happen down here. But that means that when things are happening, we can look up, right? We set our minds on things above, not necessarily like the clouds, but on things that are above the things we're going through, right? On God himself.
And that ties back to chapter 2 when we were talking about last week when Paul was talking about the elemental spirits and the principalities and that sort of thing. Right. And so he's reminding us that our experience here at this moment, our physical experience, is one, temporal. It's bound by time. Yeah. But two, it's also a small piece of a greater cosmic thing going on, right? That we don't necessarily see everything that's happening. Right. So when Paul is talking about things above, he's talking about things that are in the spiritual world, where in reality that's where our true citizenship or our true origins are at. When we think about people who are exiles or people who are living in a country that's not necessarily their own, they'll always say, my heart is in whatever my country of origin is. And so and so they're often thinking back to their homeland and stuff. And so Paul is actually calling us and reminding us that our allegiance isn't necessarily here to the temporal things that are here on earth, but actually to the eternal things that have far greater consequences and are lasting forever. They don't go away. Right. And so it's a reminder that when we're going through difficult times or not difficult times, if we're trying to make decisions or if we're trying to live a godly life, that our focus is not on how is this going to benefit me now in this moment, but what are the consequences of my actions on a more cosmic scale.
On a grander scale, yeah. Right. It says, for you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. This is a reference to baptism. We've died to sin. We were buried in the water, if you will. And our life is now in Christ. I love how he says is now hidden with Christ in God. That makes us part of the Godhead, right? Not that we're God. No. But that our life is now part of what makes up his. So like when I think about something like this, I think about our kids, right? Our kids are two very separate people.
Sure.
They have their separate personalities. But as any mom would probably say, they are my heartbeat. Right? And so without them, my heart would not beat like it does. You know? Like physically, yes, I would keep beating. But spiritually speaking, you know, they are such a part of me as their mom that I feel when they feel. You know what I mean? And so that idea that we become one with Christ, and in that we become one with God the Father. We become part of what is that great force, that great creation. That to me is just
and again, this, you know, Paul always is self-referential. He is always basically referring back to things that he had previously said. In chapter 2, he said that Jesus is the head, right? He's everything. He holds everything together of creation. But then also when it comes to the church body and it comes to people who are believers, he's the head of the body. And so we're connected. So we are part of him. We are literally, like you said, part of him. We are, because he's the head, and we form part of the body that is part of his completeness and part of his fullness that was referred to in chapter 2. So we're hidden, and we're hidden with Christ in God. And that's we're not hidden with Christ from God.
no.
Right?
No, we are part of him. We're part of him.
Yeah. And so that hiddenness is, what are we hidden from?
I would say from the things that are earthly.
Okay.
Because he shelters us.
Okay.
You know, it says when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. So I think he is doing exactly what a mom would do. You know, shelter.
Okay. Right.
And he hides us.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. Because, you know, in verse 5, he has a whole list of bad things that we choose to do.
Right.
But, you know, when life happens, he's who we can look to. He's who we can hide in.
Yeah. So it says in verse 5, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. And there's a couple of things here that are interesting. This word right here, sexual immorality, in the Greek is porneia. I'm sure you guys, like preachers, love to point that out because it sounds like our word pornography, right? And, ew, dirty, nasty. And what Paul is talking about here is that I want to be very clear with this so nobody misunderstands what I'm saying. All sex outside of the bonds of marriage is wrong. And that's what Paul is talking about here. So he's calling, we're going to get into that. I'm going to get into it a little bit deeper when we talk about the husband and wife dynamics here in just a little bit. But this is this is an important problem that Paul was addressing in their society with sexual immorality, because they had a different sexual ethic than the Jewish people had, right? And so we have to remember that, you know, Paul is a Jewish person, and Christianity, let's get back to real here, is a Jewish religion. It comes from Jewish roots, and over hundreds and thousands of years, it has you know, become more disconnected with the Jewishness of it because it grew out beyond the Jewish community into the other, other community, Gentile communities, where now we view Scripture oftentimes through our European or American or Hispanic or whatever lens. It's not Jewish, as we see things differently. And so that was not that was the same case when Paul was taking the message to the rest of the Gentile world. He was dealing with people at a different ethic from what the Jewish sexual ethic was, and so it was something that needed to be addressed because in their culture, some of the things that people did sexually, in terms of who they had sex with or when they had sex with them, I probably should say this discussion is going to be rated PG-13. Were different from the values and the ethics that the Jewish people had. And so Paul had to address those sort of things. And so, but I don't want to linger on that because a lot of us do. We linger on that. Yeah.
Too much. Because I will say that if you have fallen into sexual immorality in any way, there's still forgiveness.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And again,
there's still, you can't go back and be pure again, but you can experience healing and you can experience, I don't want to say it this way, but I don't know how else to say it. You can experience cleansing, if you will. Can you ever go back and not do it? No.
Well, you can't unring that bell, certainly. Right?
But there is... Too many Christians don't want to forgive this.
Yeah. This one, we like to really focus on this one as Christians because it's easy, right?
Often the people that focus on this is the people that struggle and are committing this sin.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
This is the first one on the list, but it's not the only one on the list. And so a lot of times we tend to focus on this one. And this is just waste. This is a small list, not an exhaustive list either. It's just sort of a general category list that Paul puts together that's talking about who we used to be, and these are things that marked us as people. And again, I want to be very clear. There's nothing wrong with sexuality, and there's nothing wrong with sex. It's a gift that God had given to us. But it's the abuse and the misuse of sex that Paul is talking about here. But anyways, for some reason, we as Christians like to focus on this one because sometimes it gives us the ick, and we want to ignore the other ones. Because check out what else is on the list. Impurity. That's not just talking about. It's not talking about sex. It's talking about any kind of impurity, any kind of unclean thoughts, lust. Then goes back to sex.
Impurity could also mean eating garbage.
Right.
I mean, if all you eat is fast food, that's not keeping your body pure either.
Right.
Impurity can include a whole list of things.
Sure. Yeah, and there are a lot of ways that we can harm our bodies. You talked about food, but we can talk about alcoholism or drug addiction or addiction to prescription drugs, or the other way around, where you are extremely harsh on your body and you get into like eating disorders. So there are so many different ways that we can be impure in the sense of how we hurt ourselves. But look else it has. Evil desires. That's like talking about selfishness and greed.
Yeah.
And
wanting to hurt somebody.
Yeah. That one is a real one, right? That we all struggle with. But I wanted to point out what Paul focuses in on here, which is this right here, which is idolatry, right?
Right.
All
of those things become idolatry because we're putting ourselves above God.
Are you going to let me?
I'm sorry, I'm just stepping all over you today.
But you're right. It is all. It's all about self-worship. All of those things, when you go back to them, their root is what is going to please me, and it is not concerned with. It's not concerned with my brother. It's not concerned with those around me. It's entirely wrapped up in what is going to please me.
Right. Well, because you think about lust. We don't care how that makes the other person feel.
Right.
We're objectifying somebody and we don't care.
And usually that person doesn't even know.
Sometimes they do.
They may. But most times they don't.
So we watch a show that is unredeemed. I will say outright, it's unredeemed. I won't tell you what it is. But last night on the episode,
I watched Forge and Fire last night, so I don't know what you're talking about.
You watched it too. There were a group of men who wanted to see other men scantily dressed.
Oh, yes.
In
Now
speedos.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And you asked the question, if the girls on this particular serving crew had to dress in bikinis.
I like to watch below deck sailing yacht. There, okay? You all caught me. I like to watch reality TV show about sailboats because I like to watch the guys sail the boat. All the rest of it is garbage and sexual black. But I like to see them sail the boat. Go on.
He does. He watches it for the boat. I probably watch it for the garbage. People are train wreck on the show. So, but they were objectifying the young men that work on the boat.
Right.
And you asked the question, would the young women have been as cool as the young men were? Because the young men were like, shoot, yeah, they're going to give us a bigger tip. I'll parade around in a Speedo. And more than likely, those particular young women would have been fine with it. But when you think about that, like I said, it's an unredeemed show. It is just entertaining. When you think about that, though, we as human beings objectify people all the time. And we have no concern for their feelings. And yet, that is a big one on the list that oftentimes gets totally overlooked. Because, greed is bigger, impurity is bigger. Oh, let's talk about sexual immorality. And we don't even think about the evil desires. That person takes your parking space that you had your blinker on and you've been waiting for. We're human. Words may fly. But we don't even think about that's on the list, evil desires. And then he goes on to say, don't let these things even be part of you. Anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language. And we think nothing of those things. It's just part of being human. But we want to focus on just one part because it's the most predominant, maybe, in our society, or the most visible.
Right.
Yeah. And, Paul doesn't say that anger is bad. Sometimes rage just happens. But it's what we do with those things. It's what happens with those things that he is hitting on. Because he said, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in this stuff all the time. But your life is different. So these are things that you have to get rid of to show that you are a different person. If we're not showing Jesus in the way that we live, how will anybody ever know that we're hidden in him, that he's part of us and we're part of him? So,
right. And if we are to consider ourselves part of his body, then we have to align ourselves with the things and to align ourselves with him and his will and the things that he would do and the way that he would act. Because if my body suddenly starts doing things I don't want it to do, what am I going to do? I'm going to go see a doctor. The doctor, your hand's spasming out, give you some medicine to fix it. Or if it starts getting gangrenous or having cancer, then we remove those things from the body because that's not part of the body. It doesn't belong there. And so,
ouch.
That
doesn't mean we chuck people out.
No. But we have to heal it.
We have to love them through it.
Yeah, we have to heal it. We have to treat it. We have to do something to bring it back and to restore it so that it does align itself again with the body, become one with the body, and can hold the body, and return to being part of the system, the healthy functioning system, instead of going off on its own and doing its own thing and creating and causing more disease. But if it doesn't, it does sometimes have to be taken off. So I mean, there's a harsh reality with it. But the harsh reality is not that we do that work; it's the head that makes that choice, right?
It's Jesus and the Holy Spirit's job to convict. Sometimes it's our job to call attention to. But that's not with trumpets and loud, obnoxious flags or whatever.
Or tweets, or YouTube videos.
Yeah. The Bible has a prescription for that. You pull somebody aside and you talk to them one-on-one.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't help, you call people in the church and you say, hey, you guys believe like me and we need to help. And you do it. You do it with love. You do it with a sense of there's something wrong. We need to make it right.
We need to fix this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it says in verse 9, do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices, and put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. And that goes back to like what we were just saying right now. It doesn't happen like that. It's a process. And so it says here, you've put on the new self, which is being renewed, right? It is being renewed.
It's a process.
It's a process. It's something that's ongoing. And so it's not something that happens overnight, or it's not something that's final. Like you're like, today I'm perfect and that's it, and I will never not be perfect ever again. You may have days when you do well, and you may have days when you don't. But it is a process. And then here's verse 11. This is one of my favorite verses. Paul repeats a version of this frequently in his letters, and it says, here, there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. And so what we have here is Paul is sort of laying out a social structure, and he's setting himself up for the next idea that's going to come when he starts talking about our unity in Christ, and reminding us that there are no outsiders, there are no second-class citizens, which if you've been paying attention and you know that in just a few verses where we're talking about slaves, kind of makes you feel like, well, that's weird. How could there not be second-class citizens if they're slaves? Or how could there be second-class citizens if we're telling one whole gender, one half of humanity is to submit to another half of humanity? Like, how does that work out? And so there is a little bit of a tension here that if we actually understand and we look closer, there we'll see that it gets resolved.
But Paul says verse that people like to pull out and say, see, the Bible contradicts itself.
Right. And we're about to find out that it certainly doesn't. It's actually setting up to say something revolutionary. But I want us to understand who the people are this time. Paul is creating basically these different taxonomies of people. And it was a reality of the world that they viewed people in different categories and different systems.
I think we still do.
We still do, right? And we lie to ourselves about it and say that we don't, right?
Yeah. Well, he's saying don't lie to one another. Don't say you're something you're not. Don't hide your sin. If you're raging, tell somebody how let them help you, you help them, kind of thing, because we're that new person. So Gentile and Jew is a reference of a spiritual reference, right? It has to do with whether or not you are Jewish and whether or not you are an other. So that is not necessarily the church issue. It is grouping us in two major sections. But the circumcised and uncircumcised would be then the church issue. Are you a true Jewish believer, or are you a true Gentile believer? Right?
So there's a distinction there. So there are these classes that people had set up. And so he does say Gentile or Jews, circumcised or uncircumcised, and it's kind of like these are layers. Just to kind of like maybe clarify a little what Karen was saying, is that it's talking about there's an ethnic level, and then there's the practical practice level.
See, that's why we got to do this together. I couldn't think of the word ethnic.
But then it goes on because it's not just, ha, you Jews, we're picking on you now. No, it goes to the others because barbarian. The idea here is that a barbarian, basically, to the Greek, and we don't mean like at this time, Rome is the dominant culture, but they considered whatever was the in culture, right, was Greek, right, and so it was Rome, but the culture was Greek.
In this particular region of the world, yes.
Well, yes, in the Roman Empire, and so basically, if you were not a Greek, you were a barbarian,
right?
And that was just another a binary classification of you're in or you're out.
Exactly.
It's not like kind of. It's you're either yes, you're either Greek or you're not. You're Greek or barbarian. And so this wasn't referring to barbarians, not referring to a specific ethnic group or race. It's just basically anybody that's not part, that doesn't adhere to our Greek culture. And you did not, and it wasn't about ethnicity.
Right.
You didn't have, because the Greek culture encompassed anybody that within the Roman Empire of any race or of any ethnicity that embraced this Greek thought, the Greek modes, the Greek culture. It wasn't necessarily related to ethnicity, but Scythian. He chooses to call out a particular ethnic group. Do you know why?
No, but you're going to tell us.
No. Okay. This is cool because the Scythians were, they were a type of warrior class that were from Eurasia. So we're talking like sort of this mix between Russia and Mongolia, and they were like horsemen. They were their modern classification is Ashkenaz. Which is really interesting to me, and I have to do a little bit more research into it, because if I'm understanding right, you guys can, if you're out there and you can fact check me or correct me, I believe that the Ashkenaz ethnicity is actually what makes up the majority of the Jewish people today, like who are living in Israel. I may be wrong. If you fact, I'm not saying that. Like, don't put your hope in that. That's not where I'm trying to make any connection here. It's just an interesting little factor. But anyways, they were horsemen. They were renowned warriors who they had developed or perfected a method of shooting their bows backwards as they rode their horses, right? And so they had this. They were well-known warriors, but this is why he calls them out specifically, because in the Roman world, especially at that time, they were considered the savages. Because I'm going to probably make a mistake. It was either Pilnoy or I think it was Pilnoy had talked about how the Scythians would take their victims and they would scalp them using their hands. So they would dig their fingernails in and they would rip their scalps off. They were just, and whether that's true or not,
they were mercenaries.
They were mercenaries, but they were savage mercenaries, according to the Greek propaganda. So we don't know if that's actually true or not, but we do know that they were enemies of the Romans. They fought against them. They were what we would think of barbarians, like Conan the Barbarian, whatever. They were the ones that were the warrior class of people that were, and they were potentially Russian, outer Mongolian type people from that region, so in the north. I'm probably getting, but anyways, you get an idea. They're from the northeast. And they would come in raiding on horses. But anyways, they were the boogeymen, right? They were the bad guys. And Paul is saying here, not just outsiders, but the worstest is outsiders. They're still part of what we're, the part of this community. God not only can, but desires, and those people should be treated the same as everybody else. And then slavery free. Now we're getting into social classes and economic classes, which go beyond race, which go beyond ethnicity, which go beyond culture. I want you to be very sure of this. At this time in history, slavery was not a race-based institution. Let me be very clear. Slavery in all of its forms is wrong, period. Okay? But at this time, slavery was not a race-based institution like it was in the United States and all over Europe in the 1800s, which was categorically wrong. Okay?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It was a social class issue.
Yeah.
It was not a race issue, it was a class issue. And so when Paul is here talking about slave or free, he's basically talking about a class issue here. And he says, but Christ is all and is in all. And so he's saying that Christ encompasses and welcomes and draws in all of these people. And he's not saying that because it's like, oh, I wish this happened. He's saying that because this is what was reality.
Right.
And that's cool. And that would be earth-shattering to culture to see this mix of people that have all of these different, cornucopia of titles and cornucopia of identities all bound together under a single unique identity, and that is in Christ.
Right.
That was a lot. We haven't even actually started talking about the tough stuff.
We'll get in on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll get on Sunday. All right, so let me get the right one here. So therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. And so, hold on one second. I'm going to toss to Karen because I got to take a quick little break. And then, so she's going to talk about this, and I will be, we're going to just pause the recording, but anyways, so just bear with me for one second here, okay?
So, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with, these are all parts of the fruit of the Spirit. He says in Galatians, right?
Yep.
Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and our favorite one, patience.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all really hard things.
Yeah.
But I think if we are doing the things that we've talked about above, like putting aside different feelings and different reactions, emotions, then these things become really easy to do. We can feel for somebody else, and kindness is easy. Sometimes that's as simple as a smile, right?
Sure.
Humility, not so much, but not being too proud, not being too forceful. Patience is just hard for any of us. But I think verse 13 is the hard one.
Yeah.
Bear with each other and forgive one another.
Yeah. It says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And if you have a different translation like the ESV, or you have an older version of the NIV, and I believe even the King James Version, it says, put up with each other. I actually love that. I wish that the NIV didn't or hadn't changed that. But it says, in other versions, put up with each other. That's what bear with each other is. Like, sometimes there are people in your life who irritate you, but they are your brother or they are your sister. I mean, I don't mean like literally. I love all my brothers. Like, you guys don't irritate me. And I love all of my sisters who are sisters-in-law. And you guys don't irritate me. But I mean, there are some times where people can get under your skin a little bit. And it says to put up with some of those things because we're all quirky in our own way. And I'm sure that I probably annoy and irritate plenty of people. And I thank you all for putting up with me. But forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. And the stinger is forgive as the Lord forgave you. This is really important because we sometimes often will judge with uneven scales, right?
Yeah.
And we want a greater degree of forgiveness from Christ than what we are willing to give to other people.
Exactly.
The Bible says that while we were yet sinners, Christ forgave us. So while we were still in the act of sinning, actually, let's be real here. Christ Jesus forgave each and every person who's listening to this video right now 2,000 years before you committed the sin. So he pre-forgave you. You've been pre-forgiven, right? And every person from here on forward has been pre-forgiven for every sin that they've ever committed or will commit. There are sins in my life that I have yet to have committed that I will commit because I'm a human being and it happens, and those sins have already been forgiven. My great-grandchildren's sins, should the Lord tarry that long, I like to use big words like that, their sins are pre-forgiven.
They are. So then why do we have to ask God to forgive us?
That's a good question.
Well, because it takes our part. We have to want to be forgiven.
Okay.
You know, I can say, I forgive you, but you have to accept that forgiveness, right? And then, you think about people that are gone that we forgive because it heals us. So I ask for forgiveness because that heals me, right? You have those people that are like, I can forgive, but I can't forget. Doesn't always mean we have to forget.
Right.
Some sins are hard to forget.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that because you've forgiven somebody. Forgiveness, this is a good thing that we're talking about this, we're really intending to, but forgiveness does not mean that you justify what the person did.
Right.
Does not mean that you are letting them off the hook from the consequences of what they've done. Right. Forgiveness means that you have released from yourself any desire for vengeance or ill will, or that the fact that you're going to hold that sin against that person or whatever that wrongdoing was against them. But they still have to answer for the consequences of their actions.
Exactly.
Right? And you're not saying that, you're not minimizing either. Oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. A lot of things that have happened to you out there are a big deal. Yes. They were wrong. They were horrible.
Yes.
But to free yourself from the bondage of what that person did to you in the past, you forgive them. It doesn't let them off the hook.
No.
It doesn't absolve them from what they've done. But what it does is it frees you, right? Yeah. It frees us, and it allows us to more perfectly unite and bind ourselves to the body of Christ. It
allows healing to take place. As I come to a point that I say, how bad must their life have been if this is the only way they knew how to treat me?
Right. Yeah.
How bad must it have been for them? And I find it not an empathy.
Right.
I find a compassion that is enough to say they can no longer hurt me by my unforgiveness.
Right. Because if we don't forgive somebody, all we're doing is we're allowing them to victimize us over and over and over again every time we remember.
Some things are hard to forgive.
They are hard to forgive.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. And to go back to our watching television analogy, I'm actually not going to talk about the one. I'm going to talk about Forged in Fire because there's something interesting that happens. One of when they're forging the metals together, they often make them forge two different pieces of metal together, right? And what often happens is you know which of the smiths are experienced and which ones are not, because the inexperienced ones will just take the pieces of metal, slap them together, stick them in the fire, and then bang on them, right? And then you know what happens. What happens? They fall apart. They peel apart.
Sorry, Forged in Fire is a knife and sword building.
Yeah,
they make really cool stuff.
It's really cool. But the experienced smiths will take the pieces of metal that they're going to bind together, and they'll take them to the grinder, and they'll grind off all of the dirt and all of the scale and all of that stuff. And then when those two pieces are clear of any kind of obstructions, they smash them together, put them in the fire, they pound, and then the two pieces become one piece of metal. And in the same way, when we have unforgiveness or bitterness, and it's like that scale or whatever, it really is. When most of the time, unforgiveness is, we think of it as a defense mechanism. It's some sort of shield that I can put on myself to keep myself from being hurt again. And that prevents us from being able to bond fully if you will allow me a really, really bad analogy, but to bond fully to the body of Christ, because we have all of that muck that needs to be gotten rid of, needs to be ground off. Otherwise, we'll have inclusions, and then when we bang us against the oil can or whatever, we blow apart into a million pieces. And that's an actually really great analogy, because if we are not fully united with Christ, because we've got that stuff that's in the way, then when life comes along and we get banged against the oil can, we fall apart. We separate ourselves because there's that thing in between that's keeping us from doing this together. So if you're a tradesman, if you're a welder, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't grind it really well, then they don't stick. They don't stick.
Which is why he says, and over all the virtues, put on love, because that binds us together. You know, I don't have to have gone through what you went through in order to love you.
Mm-hmm.
I can love you in spite of the things, or because of the things you've been through. But, you know, God brings all of these pieces together, and all of these people, from the worst of us, you know, to the least of us. And he binds us together with forgiveness and love. You hear people say, I forgive the man who murdered my son. The forgiveness wasn't for that person. The forgiveness was for that parent. To be able to say, what you did wasn't right, but what you did is not going to affect me anymore. It's not going to continue to eat at me and damage me. You know, the damage is done, obviously, but it's not going to continue to control me. And that allows me then to be able to love somebody else, because I've allowed forgiveness in my life.
Yeah, so when we have forgiveness, we have love for one another, it binds us together in perfect unity. And that word unity, again, is the word that describes the harmony that exists between Jesus, the Son, God the Father, and the Holy Spirit. That triunity is a unity. And it's not saying, again, we're not claiming to be gods, but we're claiming to be exactly what the Bible says, is unified and one with Him and part of His body.
And that doesn't mean that somebody else that's part of the body doesn't rub me the wrong way some days, right? Or annoys me. But that means that we look past each other's flaws and we love each other in spite of, or because of. Because it's let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. I think that's really hard, especially for a lot of women out there. You know, we try to make peace for everybody else, but not for ourselves, right? But let peace be what rules in your heart. We're called to peace, and the end of that verse, and be thankful. It's one thing to put aside all the sins, to forgive, to act in love, to experience peace. But then there is something you have to do when all those things come together. You gotta be thankful for it.
Yeah, and then it says, and let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to the Father through Him. And I think it's just really cool, just how, look at verse 16. It says, admonish one another, which means to offer correction or offer teaching. But it says through what? Through psalms, through poetry, through hymns. These are songs that we sing, songs from the Spirit. What do you think songs from the Spirit are? Improv. It's just improv. It's just improv music. It's just Jesus likes free form jazz. You know? It's like, just a little skitty bitty ba da da da. I'm not speaking in tongues. I'm scatting.
He appreciates it when we just open our hearts.
Right. And we express ourselves artistically through poetry, through songs, and we use that to help one another The word admonish, it means a course correction. It doesn't mean shame on you.
That's right.
It means I want to help you because you're bumping off the rails a little bit here. I want to help you to get back on track. And so it's not a punishment. It's not punitive. It's correction. It's to keep you on track for what you want to do, to be part of the body of Christ. And it's just beautiful to me that the way that Paul tells us to correct one another is through singing. It's like we have a rap battle. Yo, 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 Karen, I see you off the way, or something like that. I'm not a very good rapper. That would be, I'm sure, highly offensive to many people. But it's true with art, through beautiful things, but more importantly, with gratitude in our hearts. So not like I'm mad at you or I want to bring you down, but I'm thankful for you and your contribution to the body. I'm thankful for what God has done in you.
Exactly.
And I don't want to see you hurt, or I don't want to see you go off.
Songs from the Spirit is just another way of praising.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, I'm not speaking in tongues. You could.
I could have. I wasn't then, but I could be.
You could.
Right.
It's a song that the Spirit gives you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And whatever you do. So, washing the dishes, planting the garden, driving down the road, sitting behind your desk, working at the store, whatever it is, welding in a shop.
Right.
Find a way to do it in a way that honors God and gives thanks to Him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. You knew it was coming, folks.
Here comes the loaded part.
Ka-chow. Wives. Submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. And I know everybody wants to know this. We've highlighted this in red, not because it's bad, or we're going to take it out of the Bible, but to remind me and Karen not to dwell on this, because it's a very important topic that we're going to dedicate an entire video to when we get to the letter of Philemon. There are many different ways that people like to pronounce it. But that whole letter, it's a companion letter to the book of Colossians. It's written to a person in Colossus, in that town that we're talking about, whose slave ran away. And Paul sent the slave back to his master with a letter. I'm not going to tell you what happened in the letter, because that would ruin all the fun of the next video. But we're going to talk specifically about slavery, what the Bible says about slavery, and how Paul handled this really difficult situation. It deserves its own video or two, because it's a huge topic. So don't think that we're afraid to talk about this topic. We're just not going to talk about it today, because it's super important. So let's go back up here to this one. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord.
You're just going to stare at me? Your alarm's going off.
I'm not qualified to... No, I'm just kidding.
He says in another book, though, that we should submit ourselves one to another in love. So submit doesn't mean that I'm under your feet. I'm not a doormat.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that I'm your slave.
Right.
But it is simply a way of saying, you are the head of this household. I come to you, and I respect your position.
Okay.
I love you enough to say that you are in charge.
Okay. And it would probably surprise you folks a lot to know that Karen and I disagree on this one, I think, a little bit, because I'm actually a little bit more egalitarian as far as that's concerned. This isn't a big deal to me, right? But this is what it means. I want everybody to understand this very clearly. Verses 18 and 19 go together. They cannot be separated from one another. Because the word here that says submit, this idea is not, like Karen said, an idea of weakness.
No.
We often, because in our English dialect, and in our modern understanding of what that word means, it means a weaker person has given up their will or has given up their autonomy to another person.
Right.
This is actually a military term that Paul is using here. And it means basically to put yourself in alignment or in order and be prepared for battle. And so when Paul uses the word submit in all of his epistles, and I'm sure if I was our videos were more popular, it would be getting a lot of hate right now. Because people would disagree with me. But when he uses this word, he's evoking an image, a military image of soldiers aligning themselves for battle. And they submit to one another because they align themselves under a greater good.
Yeah.
Right? And what part of that is that there has to be a corner pivot point, a person that everybody rallies to, and they work to support, and that person coordinates the movements. That person is not superior to any of them. They're just the person that people rally to. They're the person that basically holds the center, and they align themselves and they move towards one goal together, right? But that doesn't make that person any better, any more important, or the person that's necessarily in charge. They're just the one that is receiving the orders, and they're the ones that's transmitting the information to the rest of the group, and they move kind of like a hive together. If you've ever seen them, like movies like 300 or any of those movies with Romans, or even think about like the Vikings and they shield wall and they lock themselves together. That's the image that Paul is evoking here. They lock together. And so what Paul is saying here is that wives should lock together with their husbands, right? And be unified in one goal. This is a family issue. This isn't a man and woman dominating one another issue. This is a coming together, two people coming together as one. But when you have two people, one of them has to provide some sort of direction, and the other one moves with them.
Some sort of protection.
And some sort of protection, right? But that's not to say either that wives are any weaker, because I need your protection. I need you to protect me from my weak points, of which they are many. And you have a big job in protecting my weak spots, right? And supposedly, I am supposed to be the one who is supposed to lead and guide and direct, and that requires input from those around me. In those, the word that we recognize here, the official word is the phalanx, right? In those phalanxes, the leader couldn't just be plowing along, and if the flank was beginning to get crushed, and they're saying, we're being crushed, and like, I don't care, I'm moving straight ahead. Everything falls apart. They receive input from the other parts and the other units. If that side is being hurt, what do? They pivot towards it and they support that side because it needs it. And so it doesn't just mean that everybody else just does whatever I say to do. I'm talking in the sense of like this formation. But that person is the one that coordinates the movements, and we move together to accomplish a goal. And verse 19 is so important. And if I had to put this in more English terms, it would say, husbands, be worthy of following, right? Be somebody who's worth submitting to. Love your wives and do not be harsh with them. That word love is the agape word, is the agape love. We talked about that before, but that's the unconditional love that offers itself up. You put your interests aside, okay? That kind of love says whatever is important to me is secondary to what's important to my family. It's secondary to what's important to my wife and my children. Paul sticks the words husbands, love, right next to each other, because the person who is in charge has a great burden of putting themselves last. Because the leader leads and makes decisions for the best of the whole, not for the best of himself, okay, or themselves. Speaking in general terms, right, of leadership. But in the case of a family, a husband and wife situation, where Paul says, husbands, you should love your wives like Jesus loves the church. He says that in the book of Ephesians. Love your wives as Jesus loves the church, which means that you put yourself second. You give yourself up. My interests are secondary to what is important to you and what is important to my family. I would love to have a sailboat out on Lake Michigan, but I can't because this one gets seasick. So it's not going to happen ever. My greatest dream from the time that I was a child was to have a sailboat out on the Caribbean, and that will never happen, and I'm okay with that.
Married a girl that gets seasick
and sunburned. Seasick and sunburned. I've always wanted to be a pirate, and it's just not going to happen. And I'm being silly, but I'm actually being real. We've talked about this, like, hey, when we retire, can we get a boat? No, we can't. Okay, we get an RV.
He wants to live on the boat. He wants a house.
Of course, no. I want like a sailing ship that's got a gallon, but it's not going to happen because that is not congruent with the good of my family, right?
So in my submitting to you, that is also things that in my life I put aside for your greater good. That's what it means. If we submit to one another, we are looking out for the other person, right? I wish you would have thrown in here love too, because a lot of women get off with just being
tolerant
and bitter.
I put up with my
because I don't feel that way.
Right.
I don't feel that way.
Well, and that's why if a husband loves their wife, if they're a husband worth submitting to, then this is not a problem.
Exactly.
And I want to be very clear. This does not advocate spousal abuse.
No.
This does not advocate that husbands are the final word in everything, because they are often wrong. And they need correction from their wives and their children on occasion. They must be willing to hear. And that's why it says, children obey your parents and everything, for this pleases the Lord. And then, let me get the other, there we go. Children obey your parents and everything, for this pleases the Lord. So yes, children should obey their parents. That's a very good thing. But fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. And so, yeah.
You want your kids to obey you.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to fear you.
Right.
You want them to respect you, but you don't want them to feel like they can never say anything.
Right. You don't want to crush them or destroy them.
No.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I don't discipline my child because it will crush his spirit.
Right.
No. Sometimes there needs to be a little crushing. Right? Just a little.
Just a little squeeze.
But, I think as Christians, we all too often fall in these ruts of, well, he's the head of the household, his decisions are on his head. And that's not that either.
Right.
God's not saying that your decisions then become my sin. And it's not saying that your decisions are the only decisions that can be made. It's saying that together, we work together to raise our kids. And they should want to obey us because they love us, not because they're fearful.
Right.
And there's got to be room for people to make mistakes. There's got to be room for growth as a family.
Right.
And then that whole father don't embitter your children. Like, not to toot our own horns, but the kids are pretty amazing. I'm just going to throw that out there. They make great decisions for themselves. We have 2 adult children. That's real. Oh my goodness.
You are old. Oh my God.
That is so hard to say. We have an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. 18. Oh, she's going to be 19.
Just a couple months.
But they're not afraid to come to us and say, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
This is what's happening in my life. This is what I would like to do. And we go to them and we say, this is our plans. And they hash things out with us. You have a great relationship with your dad. I have a wonderful relationship with my mom. And, my dad and his mom are no longer on earth. So that's why I'm not bringing them up.
That is correct.
But you can talk to your dad about things. And he can talk to you about things. You guys have a great relationship.
The weirdest thing in the world was when my dad asked me for dating advice.
We love you, Dad.
Yeah.
And my mom and I have this relationship where I can tell her anything. And she can tell me anything. And that's because there's not embitterment in between us. The instructions for the Christian household are simply work together, help one another out.
It's so basic.
And so many get it wrong. I don't come to you and say, can I spend money because you hold the money? But I do it out of respect for you because you're the one that works really hard.
I really irritates me. Like, just buy it. If you want to buy it, just buy it.
But I have always come to you and said, I want to spend this. Can I spend this? And now both of our kids do that. Do you think it'd be okay if I spend this? Right? Because we have created this atmosphere of we all want what's best for each other. And, he's saying things that the world takes and makes explosive.
Okay.
A lot of people in the world want to say, see, Christians, you see what the Bible says. Women are second-class citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Children have to do everything blindly.
Mm-hmm.
Just because their parents say so.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't say that anywhere in there.
Not at all. No.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk more about the rest of it. But if we learn to submit one to another, we used to tell our kids, and honor preferring one another. That's a good old King James version of it.
Right.
It is honorable for me to honor you and let you do your thing first. And we used to say that about sharing toys, about which movie we were going to watch, about, maybe who got the last cookie. Right? If we as Christians would just honestly start honoring one another and putting the other one's feelings in front of my own, the rest of that chapter would be so easy.
Yeah, we wouldn't need it.
Not to mention society would be totally different.
It would be totally different. And that brings us to, I guess, kind of like our question for you to ponder on throughout the week, and that we will probably discuss in greater detail on Sunday, is I want to ask this question, and it's a very challenging question, and I want you to go deeper than Sunday school answers. So I'm going to tell you the answer that's not acceptable here in just a second. But my question is this: verses 18, 19, 20, and 21 basically lay out like the ideal household, right? The ideal Christian household. Well, what happens if the husband is a jerk? What happens when the wife is domineering and is not at all interested in submitting? What happens when the children are brats? What happens when the father's parents are harsh on their children and alienate them? What do you do? How do you fix that? Okay, and this is the answer I will not accept. Pray about it.
No.
Because that's the basic answer. Again, I'm not saying that praying about it is bad, but you should pray about it. But there's something more that should be done.
So prayer is only the first step.
Prayer is where you start from. The reason I'm saying that's not an acceptable answer is because that should always be the place you start. So that's like the starting line.
Right.
So that's like saying you should probably address the problem. Yes, you should address the
probably
problem.
put your tennis shoes on if you're going to run.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that prayer is not the answer. Prayer is the baseline. But what do we do? How does this work? If Paul is telling us to do these things, well, what if your husband is an absolute, total jerk? I'm trying not to say any cuss words in this video, so okay. What if he's a total a-hole, okay? What if your wife is a major... Anyways, what if your kids are just unruly little...
Turds?
Yeah, I was... That's probably...
That's not nice.
That's really bad. I shouldn't say that.
Just turds.
What if the family is fractured like that, but there is a Christian amongst them, or they're all Christians and they're all dysfunctioning?
Just because this is a guideline doesn't mean it's what happens, right?
Yeah, exactly. But how do we get there? Because it is the ideal. So we're not going to answer that in this video. You're going to have to come on Sunday to hear some of the answers. But I'd like for you folks to say, and if you can't make it on Sunday, then you're more than welcome to leave a comment with the video and let us know. Please be nice, because we don't want you to be rude. But if you are interested in finding the thrilling conclusion to that question, or the answer to that question, then we will be, again, like Karen said, at the park, because we said we would. It's this Sunday at 6 o'clock. We will have burgers and hot dogs and etc. And if you would like to learn more about us, our information is right there. It goes it's so weird, but anyways, right there. You'll find our information.
first half hour is like eating and chatting, and we have fun together.
We do.
We talk about everything.
And no questions are off limits. And
bring the hard ones.
Yeah, bring the hard ones. And we understand we all come from different places. I throughout the day while I'm working, I have videos on that I listen to, and one of the videos I was listening to was a pastor. He was talking about how people think that when they come to a church service that everything should be prim and proper and perfect. And he said that the church is supposed to be a hospital, and if the hospital is there for the sick and for the hurting. And so when you go to the hospital, you're going to hear people coughing, you're going to hear people retching. And the work of discipleship is messy. It's dirty. So when you come to see us, I will be teaching, but I'll have charcoal on my face because I will have been flipping hamburgers. And there may be people there that might say some cuss words. And there may be people there that don't necessarily believe everything that we believe. And that's okay because discipleship is a process and it's messy. And we're in this to work together to bring glory to God and to see hearts transformed. And so
to show compassion
to one another. And so everybody is welcome. You don't have to.
We're outside.
We're outside. You don't even have to take a shower. We may have to.
Dress code.
Please wear clothes. Don't break the law. But anyways, so come join us. And other than that, did you have anything that you want to wrap it up? Or? Okay. Well, okay. We still haven't come up with a catchphrase or like a closing thing.
See you Sunday.
Yeah, that doesn't work either. We really got to workshop this one. I mean, okay, that's quite enough.